Right, the podcast that uncovers the origin stories of some of the biggest names in entertainment, comedy, sports, media, entrepreneurship, and so much more. Nick Durst here, along with Joe Calabrese. And Joe, our guest today, I don't know what's going on. We are getting invaded by these Philadelphians as of late. Our
I know.
second in the last few weeks here. But another guest from Philly, but another Italian as well.
Another Italian. I love when we have paisans on the podcast. It's amazing. But yeah, so he's an actor, he's a screenwriter, comedian, hosts his own podcast. You could go to Vinny Presents on YouTube and you can watch his show. It's a lot of fun, very funny. We're very, very happy to have him on. We get to talk all things Italian as well. We welcome Vince Minniti to the program. Vinny from South Philly, a rival of New York City nonetheless, but we're very happy to have you on. How are you, pal? How you doing?
Doing great, gentlemen. I appreciate the invite. I'm very honored to be here on your podcast. You guys are awesome. I love your work that you do, and it's truly an honor. Thank you for inviting me.
It's the crossover everyone has been asking for. The two best entertainment podcasts out there today, joining together for this episode. And Joe mentioned it. Grew up in Philadelphia. Do you think Philly deserves its rough reputation it gets, despite the fact that it's called the city of brotherly love?
It deserves every bit of it. Yes, it does.
Well, you threw
And
batteries at Santa Claus, so you deserve it.
well, yes, snowballs, battery, you name it. God knows what they were throwing them today. But Philadelphia is an interesting city, born and raised, of course. My parents are from Calabria. But I'm first generation born and raised in the Italian market section of South Philadelphia. Yes, it is South Philadelphia still. And it's great childhood, great neighborhood, very typical to a lot of neighborhoods that are, from yesteryear, of those strong Italian parochial neighborhoods, just like we had in, Brooklyn and the North End and Boston and so forth and so on. So we all kind of grew up in that period of time, which unfortunately is no more.
Fellow Calabrian, I'm a Calabrese, so I speak the same language that you do. My father actually grew up in Little Italy, right in Manhattan. So we have a lot of really deep-rooted Italian connections in and around the city. So I wanted to ask you specifically because of all the people we've had on the podcast, you would probably be the best to answer this. Italian culture in Philadelphia versus New York City. Are there any differences, any subtle differences whatsoever?
It's an interesting question. I think that you'll find so many similarities that it's just on a more magnified level in New York. Of course, I mean it's such a bigger place, but no, there's a lot of similarities. I have a lot of great friends up there, and then in fact, unfortunately, I was supposed to be at a movie shoot yesterday, and I couldn't go. But so in Queens, but there's so many. Yeah, with the plastic on the couches, you know, the mannerisms, the crazy sort of language that's been invented. It's a pseudo Italian, regional Sicilian Calabrese dialect fused with the English language. So no, there's a lot of similarities. In fact, I think that I'd like to make sure that we send a lot of love and respect to our brothers in New York, all over the country, but especially in New York, because I think there shouldn't be there shouldn't be competition. There should be more unity between New York and Philly, because there's a lot of opportunities for Italians to work together and do something, especially on social media.
Do you feel that people in South Philly or Philadelphia in general that are Italian are like just such savages and enamored with Chinese food, like the Brooklyn and New York Italians? Because I mean, it's just crazy here that the Italians in New York, like all they want is this Chinese food. I'm wondering what it's like in Philadelphia.
Well, I had some the other day, so you might be right.
Yeah.
But there's a great Chinatown in Philly, man. Let me tell you, and I'm there almost every day because I'm near there, so I commute through that area. And Chinatown's awesome. I like Chinatown because they've really preserved the identity of their neighborhood. There is a weird affiliation, though. You're right. Between the Italian and the Asian, and you'll catch them in our restaurants, and they'll catch us in theirs. But yeah, there's I don't know if it's the noodles, man. There's some sort of a connection there.
Well, the way the story goes is that the Asians invented pasta, so that's where the Italians get the macaroni from. And some explorer back in the day went over to Asia and brought back the macaroni to Italy. But who knows if that's true or not. But if we're talking Philadelphia and we're talking food, of course I have to ask you where's the best cheesesteaks? Where's your go-to for the cheesesteaks?
That would be sacrilege. Now you're asking me to get like a bullseye in the back of my shirt right now.
Um,
No, but there's a lot of great places there. I mean, I don't believe in just if you're going to go to Philly, you shouldn't just try one or two places. You should probably, if you're into a cheesesteak, you should try several. There's a lot of great ones in the neighborhood. I mean, Angelo's, of course, has been a big name out there. There's my friends over at Campo's. That's over in Center City. Angelo's is down near the Italian market. Excuse me, the Italian market. There's of course Gino's and Pat's, but and then if you're from the Northeast, then it's Steve's. There's a lot of different places. The thing is, though, I would say there's a lot more competition than there were years ago. So there's plenty of places to go and try.
so something I noticed is every time I've ever gone to Atlantic City recently, and I don't go too often, but I mean, you can't go more than 2 feet without seeing somebody in a Philadelphia Eagles jersey. So I mean, people here in New York, they seem to always want to go to Atlantic City, but I think the Atlantic City, like the number one tourists are coming from Philadelphia. Would you agree with that statement?
Well, I mean, the Atlantic City Philly connection's been that goes back a long time, so no doubt about it. And it's good to see a lot of New Yorkers in Atlantic City too. I like to see that. There's a lot of I mean, Atlantic City started to make a little bit of a comeback. I'm noticing in recent years, so that's it's a city that you always kind of want to root for because of the history. It was a vibrant place. I mean, if you've seen Boardwalk Empire, a lot of that was. I mean, a lot of it, of course, is fiction, but a lot of it's true too. So it should have been a very big, posh, beautiful place that unfortunately throughout the decades, a lot of politicians have just let
It's
go to
not
hell.
safe there anymore. It's rough. You
Now,
walk on that
It
boardwalk,
is rough.
you gotta
Yeah.
be careful.
and it shouldn't be that way. But again, it's negligence and it's the effects of bad politics that they just let languish for decades. But you see in revival in certain parts too. I mean, look at Philly. There were parts of Philly you wouldn't even. I mean, our neighborhoods were so I want to pretty much segregated that you wouldn't want to cross certain areas because back in the day everybody had their cultural boundaries. Now you can walk just about anywhere in Philly. I know they say it's dangerous and that, but it's really not as bad as you would think. Um, and you see a lot of revival in a lot of these neighborhoods. And there's also what I like to see now is there's a lot of people that are coming back to South Philly and really want to. They don't want to renovate these houses. They want to keep that old spirit, that old traditional sort of mom and pop feel to some of these houses. There's a ton of Facebook groups and different places where people are selling and buying old doors, and they love that nostalgia of the good old days.
Yeah, absolutely. Have to preserve Philly like we do here in New York City. Buildings over the years, like my father's building's over 100 years old. So, I imagine this what we have over here, you guys are running into similar issues, especially in those older ethnic neighborhoods like the one that you grew up in. So, we'll talk about mom and pop. I want to talk about your family, your upbringing, a little more about that. Where did you go to school? Where did you go to high school? Did you go to school after that? When you were growing up, what type of career did you want, and how much of you had in regard to family influence in terms of steering you in a certain direction? Because as Italians, we know that your father wants you to do something, and uh, maybe sometimes they want you to do something that you don't really want to do. So, how was your family's influence in regard to your career?
Well, touching on what you mentioned about as far as going to school, Catholic school, of course, St. Paul's, which is no longer there. It's there, but it's no longer St. Paul's, unfortunately, like a lot of Catholic schools. But St. Paul, St. John Newman, that was the typical high school where everybody went that was from South Philly, more or less. And we grew up with that same understanding that, which this may sound crazy to some people, but I think it's innocently wrong. Get a good job. That was the go to get an education, get a good job. What I've learned growing up with some of my friends that, like for instance, my buddy who's Jewish, he was brought up start a good business. So there's a big difference between get a good job and start a
Yeah.
good business. So I try to tell and educate my kids, make sure they do something that's very valuable, such as create a business or something, a practice that will benefit you beyond working for someone, because most people are probably worth 4 or 5 times more than what they're earning.
Oh,
That's usually the what the benchmark of what they say, economists anyway. So I mean, my father was a butcher, my mother was a seamstress, which you couldn't get a job doing that. Philly was at one time, very long ago, even before my parents came over in the 60s, it was the workshop of the world. Major industrial place. I mean, the love of row homes was they're really only built because they were where the factory workers were supposed to live, which were next to the factories. There was nothing luxurious or glamorous about row homes. They were just meant to be places where you could walk to work for the big factory. But of course, you've seen a lot of those factories close down and shutter over the decades. But there was a time where Philly had a big textile industry. They made a lot of suits. You had Botany 500, you had big. And so my mom worked in one of, as well as my aunt and a lot of other Italians. They all worked because when they were little, like my mother and many other women, they learned when they were very small how to sew in Italy, and so they learned how to make shirts and all those different things and dresses, and so that benefited them when they came over. So you'll find that a lot of people did that because that's what they learned. Father, he was butcher, like I said. We come from a long line of people in that did that type of work in Italy. So I went to Italy in 2000, the first time. I never was there, so I went there the first time. I met my grandfather. And I actually saw what it was to grow up in those mountainous regions, and how I mean, he literally built his home, by hand. They actually made
With his
their
bare
own home.
hands. Hey, listen,
And so,
construction, contracting, it's in our blood too.
yeah. So it's amazing too, because you go back in those days, in the old days, and a lot of those people didn't. It's sad to say, they didn't know how to read or write. I mean, or they didn't have.
mm-hmm.
Some of them didn't even have shoes. I mean, this sounds crazy to us today, but it's just how it was, man. And so things were really hard. So I understand. I kind of understood. I always had a foot sort of in the old country, but now when I went there, I realized how amazing and how different things were, and just the natural beauty of things. And I never tasted food the way I tasted food when I was there. The natural taste of just picking a fig off of a tree on the top of the mountain was like nothing you ever experienced. We had fig trees here, of course, but just to kind of give you an idea for those that may not have been there, which I highly recommend whether you're Italian or not. But I kind of grew up with that mindset, and for a long time, I worked in local. I started out as a busboy, Colombo's, which was the mecca, of restaurants back in the old days. It was Italian Market, right in that area, block away from where Angelo's is, and that was a place that all the nightclub singers used to go to. Sinatra, the Rat Pack, prior to Atlantic City and casinos. That's where everybody went. It was a nightclub. It was Frank Palumbo was a guy who brought over all the Italians. It was a boarding home. It was the center of influence for Italian American life. And I worked there. Fortunately, it burned down. And I worked in a string of other Italian restaurants. And I eventually worked Four Seasons, Ritz-Carlton in Philly. And then I went to LA, and I worked in Beverly Hills at Il Fornaio, which was a great restaurant over there on Beverly Drive, which I miss very much. And so that was most of my background. Now I do something a little bit different. Well, and of course, I have my fun one here with doing the podcast.
So
And of course, I also I'm now, of course, I'm getting back to my original love when I was out in LA, which is screenwriting and production.
yeah, so you mentioned you went out to California. So how difficult is it? I mean, we know the answer, but in your personal journey to break into acting, what were those audition processes like for you? And then how did you take that experience you had doing the acting stuff and transition it over to now doing the screenwriting?
Well, when I was out there, I noticed that it was really, really difficult for a lot of people. And by the way, there's also a big fashion industry out there and music industry. So everybody's that's like, the place you want to go for all those type of industries, but it's also very difficult. So I think you have to have a certain degree of natural talent. I'm not saying I do, but for a person to really make it, you have to have a certain degree of natural talent. You have to have an obsession over what it is you want, whether it's being in the acting business or music or whatever it is. So it takes that, as well as the most important thing, access. You have to have access. And I think if you have those three components, you're likely going to reach success. But it's tough. I've seen people just barely making it. People that just, they came, they went. It's a grinding operation out there. And most people don't make it. But again, if you have those three elements, I think you have a good shot at making it. For me, I like the acting part of it, but then I really enjoyed the storytelling because, growing up, I always really liked to write sketches, even when I was a little kid. I enjoyed the writing part of it. And I wrote a screenplay or two, and then I came back, fast forward, got married, had some kids, kind of put everything on pause to do what a good Italian boy should do, take care of his family.
Yeah.
And now I'm back at it with back in entertainment, and it's great. I'm talking to a lot of people, and it's never been easier. Thank God for places like Instagram and social media, because now you can connect with anybody, just like I'm connecting with you guys, and the access element to get access is right at our fingertips.
For sure. So you have your podcast, which you mentioned before, Vinny Presents. You interview interesting people in film, music, social media. When did you decide that you wanted to pursue doing a podcast?
So it was a little over about a year ago, and I started seeing all these different, podcasts, interviews, and lives, and I said to myself, that'd be pretty cool. I just wanted to do it, not for any kind of money or anything like that, but I wanted to. I found it interesting to be able to connect with people and hear their story. I enjoy hearing about people's journeys. I like the fact that I can meet people and of course, access is another element of it too, because then you start to make affiliations with people. And my whole thing was I just wanted to make it mutually beneficial. And I knew that just starting out, I didn't have anything. I didn't have anything of value, but I did find good people around my circle that I interviewed, and they were really cool. And the thing kind of just slowly but surely snowballed. It's difficult still. I mean, YouTube is as I'm sure you know, it's a tough thing to do. It's really hard. I mean, and you have but so many hours in a day to devote to things like that. But I busted through maybe 1,100 and some odd subscribers on there. But my real goal was to build my social media presence. Facebook, I already had a nice amount of people, but I had nobody on TikTok. I was afraid of TikTok. I was like, I don't know if they'll hijack my information, whatever. So I kind of was leery. But Instagram, I found it very easy. I enjoyed it, and it just kept going. So I kept being persistent. Now I've grown to a nice following on here, and I met some really great people, and I've interviewed people that just did it because they liked me or because they just enjoyed to talk to somebody. I mean, I interviewed Lou Lombardi, great guy from The Sopranos, and um, also Pasquale. I mean, another one from The Sopranos. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but I should be having a pretty heavyweight actor that everybody knows. If this happens, I don't want to give it away, but that should happen hopefully in the next week or two. So I'm starting to get some really interesting. They're all interesting, but I'm starting to get a different level of actor and filmmaker. And Dominic Milano, a guy did a documentary on Chuck Zito and Michael Madsen. Great guy. We hit it off. We became friends. So it's I'm a social. I guess I'm saying I'm a sociable person. So being in the food and beverage industry and being involved with people, and it's made me more comfortable to approach people and to make that connection with them. So that's why I think I have that ease of doing the podcast.
Absolutely. Talent and distribution go hand in hand. So you mentioned social media, good segue for this. What was the moment that you started seeing kind of an uptick in your following, and that moment that you realized that what you were actually producing and putting out there, people were interested in your original content?
Well, it was more incremental for me. I don't think there was anything that really kind of just, I woke up one day and it was like, wow, I just got 1,000 new followers or whatever. It was more that I was able, because I understood, I knew instinctively, like, this isn't going to happen overnight. But besides what all these, you'll see a lot of things, of course, online saying how to, explode your social media. To me, I haven't encountered that. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but for me, I understood incremental growth is the best way to go. And that's just in life. Incremental growth is the way to go. So I said, okay, I'm going to commit to, hopefully in 6 months, this is where I'll be as far as my following. And I actually surpassed those goals. So, and I'm still doing that. I'm still, slowly growing it, which I think is the best way, because you get real people, you build a real audience, you make a real connection with people, and you become friends with a lot of these people. And for me, that's what keeps me energized, keeps me going. Because then all of a sudden, tomorrow I'll find someone online that's really cool, and then I wind up interviewing them, and there's a new affiliation. And I like to make everything mutually beneficial. I like it to make it so that they're getting something out of it, I'm getting something out of it, and everybody's happy.
Absolutely. So You mentioned the affiliation. You were associated with a lot of great Italian entertainers and various comedians, much like we are now. You're known for your comedy clips and skits on your social media. Is comedy ultimately something you want to continue to pursue? Have you ever done any stand-up? Have you thought about doing something along those lines?
I did do stand up a few times. My most famous one was when I did an open mic night over at the Comedy Store in L.A. Thanks to my hometown girl and friend Eleanor Kerrigan, who is she used to be the fiance of Andrew Dice Clay, and they still do videos together. You'll see Eleanor in a lot of Dice's videos. She's a sweetheart, neighborhood girl, and knew her brother and a couple of her brothers. So that's how when I went out to LA, I hooked up with her, and I hooked up and I met Dice, and then I got to be on uh inside the Comedy Store doing some stand up there. So it was a lot of fun. Um, yeah, comedy's always been great. I loved it. I loved growing up watching comedians. I used to love watching Dom DeLuise, and one of my favorite movies of all time was Wise Guys with Danny DeVito and Joe Piscopo. And that type of humor, 29th Street and, all the 80s type of comedy movies. I always was really, really attracted to comedy. And it was something that I also always tried to emulate. I met Joe Pisco by the way later on in life, great guy. And so yeah, comedy's always been something that I've always enjoyed and tried to do. A lot of skits we've done, they've done really well. I'd like to do more. It's but you try to balance it out. There's so many, you want to do something that's good. It's a lot of work. I'll tell you, man. Trying to run a podcast and all these other things. So you try to get time in to do that. But I love watching social media for that reason too. A lot of great comedy out there. A lot of it's from New York, of course. A lot of you guys up there have some great stuff going on.
So you talk about Comedy Store, countering Dice Clay. Dice isn't the one of the only major names, especially in the world of Italians, that you've gotten to know. You've had a couple of acting credits. You've had the opportunity to meet some major A-listers. So I'll let you talk about that. So how did you meet a certain person that we talked about before the show started? When did you
Philadelphia's
meet him?
legend.
Philadelphia. He's got
Should
his
have
own
been the host of
statue.
WrestleMania.
One
Uh,
of one of the benefits of living and growing up in South Philly is that every so often, almost it felt like every other year, there would be a Rocky movie and they'd be
Yeah.
filming in Philly, right? So uh one well earlier than that, they shot one, it was a Rocky Five, I think it was, and I was still in grade school. And we ran after school, trying to figure out where it was, and we never got a chance to sneak a peek. Fast forward to Rocky Balboa. I happened to be in the neighborhood that day. I heard they were shooting Rocky Balboa, so it was right around the corner from my house. I went down to the Italian market. I'm just hanging out. I'm talking to a few PAs and blah blah blah. Next thing you know, somebody said, "Hey, listen, come here. Do you want to be in the scene?" I was like, "Sure." So I like called out of work. I signed paperwork, to the waivers that they make you sign, and I did two scenes with Sylvester Stallone, and I was like blown away. I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe I met him. I'm talking to him, very friendly, very focused because it was work to be done. Got to talk to his brother Frank, who I then later on met in Beverly Hills a few times. I would see him in that neighborhood. And so I got to do two scenes with Stallone. It was one-liners here and there, but I had, I guess, you know, let's see, it was probably about 3 or 4 hours that we spent together, and it was great. I'm telling everybody about it. I'm excited, and then the movie comes out, and I'm nowhere to be seen. So I learned the hard way that just because you're in a it doesn't mean you end up in a movie. But it was a lot of fun. I got to meet him.
That's
show
awesome.
business. Show business is tough business, huh?
But it was a great thrill. I mean, look, who doesn't want to be
That's a
excited?
learning experience too,
Yeah, yeah.
to be on a
But
set.
just like neighborhood guys, man, and I knew some of the neighborhood guys that actually their stepfather knew, and it was interesting how they knew a lot of people from the neighborhood.
Awesome stuff. So, Vinny, in your life or your career, what would you say is your right moment? I mean by that, it's a time or place where you want to pursue something. You ask somebody for advice. They said, Vinny, or maybe, your family, Vincenzo, don't do that. It's a bad idea. It's not going to work out. And you were like, you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. And in the end, you will see why it is that I'm right about this. And I can tell you, I told you so.
My I'm right moment probably was LA. There's a lot of detractors. What are you out there for? Well, it's a waste of time. It's a waste of your energy. Nobody makes it out there. But I went there honestly to see my buddy. My buddy had moved out there, and so I said, you know what, I'm doing it. I want to take a shot. At that point, of course, I was single. I had no obligations, which is, trust me, the best time to follow your dreams.
Joe.
Trust me. If you take away one thing I've said the whole podcast, please listen to me out there. If you're single, you have no obligations. Pursue your dreams now. So I did that. I went out there and I just wanted to experience it. It really wasn't. I really didn't have a certain agenda in place. I just wanted to experience it, and I'm glad I did. And so it was a great life altering experience. I spent about 7 or 8 months out there. It was amazing. Met a ton of different peoples, actors, you name it. And I really enjoyed it, and it's something that I look back. It's something like, I kind of wish I stayed there, but you never know. I think I might have to make a comeback at some point. But that was the point where I didn't listen to anybody and I did what I wanted. And it was good. It was a good move.
Very, very good move. Quickly before we let you go, you talked about the Comedy Store. You talked about Dice. Any other big names that you kind of were able to meet over there during your time, whether you were doing a set there or just hanging out and kind of meeting people and running around the same crowds? Who else did you have the opportunity to meet?
When I was there, I mean, I was really happy to meet Dom Herrera, who's a local South Philly comedian, and Eleanor was very sweet. She introduced us, and it was great because he went to St. Nick's Parish, which was like a mile away from where I grew up, and it was really cool to hear some of his stories. Dice was awesome. He was very quiet and very like very low key. He was very 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 friendly, very very nice. Sebastian Maniscalco, Bobby Lee. Who else was there? I bumped in one time to Joe Rogan at that time. He didn't really. He used to hang out, but there was a problem with the Comedy Store at that point. I'm not sure if he wasn't going there for whatever reason. I think there was a big feud between
It
him and
was Carlos Mencia. Yep.
Yeah, this is
Feud.
2007
Right.
or 2008, I think, something like that. So there was that issue going on, whatever. And at that point, the Comedy Store was still kind of not. Now it's really booming, but it was kind of like on a downtrend at that point. Gary Oldman, Val Kilmer, John Voight. John Voight was really fun. He was cool.
Oh, those good names.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember I used to see Frank Stallone a lot, hanging out at Cafe Roma with a lot of different people there. They actually hired me too when I got to LA. Like the first day I was in Beverly Hills, I got hired by Il Fornaio and Cafe Roma. And Cafe Roma was like, any all the celebrities hung out there. It was a huge popular place. And the guy there, his name was Giovanni. He was from Calabria. He liked me. So, I spoke Italian. He liked me. So he hired me. I went to Il Fornaio. The lady there, she hired me. So I had to choose one, but I wound up with Il Fornaio, which I probably should have went with Cafe Roma. But
at least you weren't struggling to find work or anything like that.
No, it was amazing. I mean, I had a good background in food and beverage, and I could speak Italian. They liked me. And so the East Coast thing, I think they liked that too. So, but it was, it was really cool. And Val Kilmer was really nice, very like genuine, very, a lot of these guys are cool, man. John Voight, he was teasing me. We were kidding around about South Philly, and he knew I was from Philly. I guess he could tell my accent, and he was telling me he's from Yonkers. The whole deal. It was cool, man. I met a lot of great people. It was a great experience.
Well, Vinny, we appreciated your time here. We definitely have to collaborate on something in the future. Nick and I would love to appear on your podcast, but even then, maybe get together in person. Maybe go out.
Listen, I think we got to do Vinny Presents, and him right, live from a low-level, old rundown hotel in Atlantic City near the Claridge. We'll go there. We'll put our show on the stage. I think everybody will love that.
I like that idea. I think we could make a huge splash down there. No pun intended.
A grassroots Italian, a really thick Italian movement. But Vinny, we appreciate your time. Find you all on social media channels. So please tell everybody, please tell our listeners and our viewers where we can find you. And if there's anything else you would like to personally share or promote, we always give our guests the last words here. So if there's anything else you would like to add, please do so. And again, we appreciate your time. Can't wait to come on the show. Can't wait to get together in person. Let's do that soon.
Well, you said it. I'm looking forward to you guys being on my show. Again, it's called Vinny Presents. It's on YouTube. Please subscribe. But you also can find me doing lives on Instagram. And I like to do a lot of those pop-up lives. And if you go to my channel, Vinny From South Philly, you'll find me there, Facebook, and yes, even TikTok, even though I regrettably don't go on there that much. But Guys, you've been great. I'll make sure I'll tell all my audience, make sure they're keeping an eye on you guys and following you. Anybody's watching it from my people, make sure you follow these guys and supporting them as well. You guys are awesome. I can't wait to do this again on my end of things.
Appreciate it. Thanks for the kind words. That's going to do it here for this episode of You Know I'm Right. For our very special guest, Vinny in South Philly, my co-host Joe in Staten Island. I'm Nick in Staten Island, and this has been You Know I'm Right.